Welcome to the first episode of Gavel Gab. I'm your host, Carly Spencer. You may be expecting me to jump right in to start spilling the legal tea, prenup tips, and courtroom stories, but we're starting by flipping the script. To kick things off and give you a behind-the-scenes look at the voice behind Gavel Gab, I've brought in someone very special to conduct today's interview to help you get to know me before we dive into all our amazing guest episodes. After all, you really should know why you should even trust or listen to anything I have to say, right? Without further ado, let me introduce you to today's guest host and co-host, Andrea Odom, my new intern, paralegal, co-producer of the podcast, and already one of the hardest workers I've ever met. In under 2 weeks of working with Andrea, she has jumped in with both feet, organizing law firm systems, supporting clients, and keeping the office and me on track. She's intelligent, intuitive, kind, curious, and seriously will be unstoppable in her life and career. She also loves her husband and is a proud mom of an adorable 4-year-old. She loves writing, art, anything crafty, and law school, which is impressive in itself. And if you're watching on YouTube, as you can see, she is a snazzy dresser because we both believe when you look good, you feel good. And I have to say, she shows up every day looking like a whole legal baddie. Andrea, welcome to the mic.
Thanks, Carly. It's great to be here, and what an amazing introduction. Very excited to do this with you today, even more excited to turn the mic on to you. In this very first episode, I'll be interviewing Carly so you can get to know the woman behind the mic, her story, her path to becoming an attorney, her bold leap into starting her own law firm in her 20s, and maybe we'll get to even some relationships and some real life stories. So that'll be really fun. It's going to be great, unfiltered conversation where we'll dive into the journey, the chaos, and the passion behind Gavel Gab. Now, let's get started.
Let's go.
Okay. Let's start from the beginning. Tell us who Carly Spencer is, in your own words. Who are you outside the courtroom? Who are you off the mic?
So born and raised in Montgomery, Alabama, and have always had a pretty tight-knit but small family. And when I went to college, I went pretty close by. I went to Troy University in Troy, Alabama, and strangely enough got a degree in applied mathematics. Most lawyers hate math, but I never thought I was going to be a lawyer.
Right.
When I went down that path, I actually thought I was going to be a data scientist. So obviously, life has taken me down a much different road than that. So when I graduated college and realized I was not going to be a data scientist, I did an internship in upstate New York. Dream job, General Electric's global research facility, the path that I wanted. I was going to get my master's and PhD in statistics until I sat behind a computer all summer and realized I might be good at this, but I hate it. And this is not going to be a sustainable career. And why am I going to go to an extra 6 years of school for something that I don't even want to do? So panicked and ultimately landed on law school and ended up in Raleigh, North Carolina, which I've been here since 2017. I am a former pageant girl, competed in the Miss America system, and that has, I think, led to a lot of my courtroom demeanor and success, I guess you could say. I really, really love interpersonal relations and studying the psychology of that. So in free time, I spend a lot of time on books related to leadership and how to be a better human to other humans and things like that. I am vice president of a nonprofit board called Capital City Clauses here in town. We give back to local children's charities. I have a adorable mini golden doodle named Remy, and he is thankfully not here with us today because in recording episodes he's been a menace. So he is having a fun little day to himself. And what else do? I love pickleball. I love being outside. I love hosting dinner parties. One of my 2025 goals was to host a themed party every month, so I think that's going to probably come up on the podcast over different episodes. That was not an elevator pitch by any stretch of the imagination, but that's a little background to start with.
So you mentioned the mathematic experience, and I think that's great. I think that is a skill that absolutely helps when you're a family law attorney. Any type of attorney would benefit from that kind of experience, but I think it makes you especially unique in that regard because it's like you said, lawyers don't like math. Everybody knows it. It's something that my professors in my 1L year have said in every class, and I think it's great that you have that extra experience. Very impressive. your experience in pageants, I believe, has truly affected you and has allowed you to do very well in a courtroom. I've seen that myself. She's amazing. So I just wanted to touch on those things because I think it's great. It's those types of experiences that make you exceptional. So,
Thank you.
was there a moment in your life when you knew you were going to become a lawyer, or was it more of a winding path?
Definitely winding path. There are two very distinct moments. So the first one was I was sitting in my private office in upstate New York doing an internship. It was the coolest internship. It was a giant campus. They had on-site dining, and I had my own office as an intern. But I was about halfway through the summer and realized that most of my time, while the events were fun, the events were just because I was an intern. It wasn't anything to do with the actual job. And so I started to see more and more that the job was 95% staring at a computer and crunching numbers. And so that was when I knew I liked the analytical side of my brain that allowed me to do the math degree, but I needed to use it for something else. And I reached out to friends and family, and across the board, everyone said, you should go to law school. I was like, well, what about an MBA? They're like, law school. I said, I don't want to be a lawyer. So that's why that's moment number one, because I truly went into law school with no plans to be an attorney. But I liked the idea of, if I got a law degree, I could be a lawyer.
Yeah.
You know, there is a fallback there. Whereas when I thought about, if I got an MBA, I can't go be a businesswoman. Like there's not an actual tangible job you can get with that. It's kind of a stepping stone, at least in my eyes, especially getting an MBA without any other experience to add to it. So that was moment number one. And then the other moment that I knew I was going to be a lawyer, I was studying for the bar exam. And you have to understand, I graduated during COVID. So March 2020 was when the world shut down. I was supposed to graduate May 2020. And my plan at that point in time was to apply for PR, marketing type roles. And I was willing to start at the bottom. I didn't want to leverage my law degree to be a lawyer. I wanted to leverage the law and math degree and then my own side hustles and different ventures other entrepreneurship things that I did, and my pageant experience to get into marketing and PR. And I was convinced if I just get in that interview room, I'll convince them why a lawyer with a math degree, which makes no sense, wants to take a entry-level marketing position. And that was just not going to happen during COVID. So that summer I was applying, hearing back from nobody. I mean, no one was really hiring anyway, so you were lucky to find a job opening.
That was a difficult time.
Yes. But let me tell you what there were job openings for: lawyers. So we were, in a lot of ways, essential, and people were still hiring. There was still a need for it. So out of necessity, I remember I was sitting in the library on the law school campus studying for the bar, and it was about halfway through summer, and I came to the conclusion. I finally accepted I was going to have to be a lawyer if I wanted a job. So it did not start, I would say it wasn't really a willing thing. I wasn't excited about it. And my first job was absolutely atrocious. And I actually, after the first 6 months, said, I'm never going into law again. I'm never doing this. And here we are. Now I have a law firm and I've clearly gotten past that. But those were the two moments where I knew I would be a lawyer, because even throughout law school, that wasn't my plan.
Yeah, that's a very unique journey. You grew up in a single parent household. Mm-hmm. How has that shaped your journey and allowed you to, grow this big interest in family law?
Yeah, so it was just me and my mom until I was about 10, and my dad was not in the picture. At that time, the first 10 years, a little bit, but he was not paying child support. And I don't want to be very clear. I didn't know any of this till I was in my 20s. My mom shielded me from all of it, and my thoughts about my dad are for maybe another episode or my therapy appointments. But he was not involved in an emotional way, mental way, or financial way. And my mom was making like $30,000 a year, wow. Also trying to finish her degree in accounting. So there was a lot going on, and I would just say the money was not flowing. And we, again, I know this now, we qualified for food stamps that my mom was just, too precious. She was like, no, I'm going to do it on my own. And I never knew we were poor. I thought whenever she told me no to something, it was a parenting decision, not a lack of finances decision. So I want to say kudos to her. But as an adult, I started asking more questions. By 20, I was very removed from my father. Have been estranged and haven't spoken in at least 5 years now. Then it was maybe once every year or two I would hear something from him. And so I started asking questions, and my mom is so smart and so wonderful, and I'm like, how did I end up with this guy? But, being a family lawyer, being in family law yourself, we've both seen really great men and women end up with terrible spouses. And thankfully, she didn't marry him. And so again, happy that they met, or I wouldn't be here. But I'm really, really proud of her being in Deep South Alabama in the 90s, not marrying him because she thought she needed to. But all of that to say, I started to really realize what she went through mentally, keeping that from me, trying to still allow me to have a relationship with him if he stepped up to the plate, which he didn't, and not ever throwing the lack of. I mean, it's upwards of $50,000, I believe. Like, she had a child support order. She just couldn't get it enforced. He was across state lines, which now I do what I do. I realize the complications there. And she would go to the child support office and ask for help and just didn't get any. And the big turning point for me and why I have a passion for being a family lawyer now is knowing that story, knowing what she went through quietly, and with that teeny tiny salary, she saved up her money and hired a lawyer to help her enforce the child support, because child support enforcement can only do so much, especially when you're talking another state. And she paid him a bunch of money and nothing happened. And it was a big fat waste. And so when I am talking to single parents or people that are divorcing about to be single parents, I tell them, like, I really have a passion for this because I want to be the lawyer my mom needed and didn't get.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's great that you have that unique experience, and it's easier for you to relate to these people that you're helping. And I think that's really important in what we do.
I really see my mom in a lot of them. And you actually were with me in a consultation sometime in the last week. I had a mom asking me, how do I have these conversations with my kid and how do I talk about these things? And one, just to be clear, that is so outside the realm of legal advice. That is, seek a therapist. And I always just claim that. And I'm like, but this is what I would do. And I always tell them, I was raised by a single mom who had to have tough conversations with me. But if you always keep that in mind and let the child make the relationship and the other parent not take advantage of it, you will always end up on top. And I'm so grateful my mom handled it the way she did and shielded me from that, because I wouldn't have understood. And while it was it hurt for my father to be indifferent and not be around. She always made these excuses for him, like he has to work, he's really busy. And so I think that helped. Obviously, there were still feelings of not being enough, like, why am I not enough that he wants to be here? But I think a lot of that, those white lies that parents do have to tell, I think that that's true, really shielded me from as much emotional damage as it might have been if I just knew, we drove an hour and a half to meet at the pickup location and he just didn't show up. Because back then we didn't have cell phones. So we would drive an hour and a half and just wouldn't show up. And Mom, we'd wait for an hour. She wouldn't hear anything. And she'd be like, oh, something came up with work, honey. Your dad's really busy. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. My dad's I'm sad, but he's so busy. Right. My dad's cool. And so you think about that in the inverse of, like, I don't know, haven't heard from him, didn't show up.
Right. That can be very traumatic.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I try to, remind these parents it's hard, and especially, I know my dad made her life harder by being this way and not being involved. And so I want parents to know you can turn out okay, but, really shield your kid from it, and it's going to hurt. But they will one day look back and realize what you went through to protect them, and they will appreciate it so much.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I want to switch into a little bit of law school talk. Tell me about your 1L year.
I'm one of those weird people. I think you're like me. I loved law school. Yep. I love that you have a challenge. It is a time-limited challenge for the semester, and then you have a test at the end to decide whether you have accomplished the challenge. And once you get into the real world, there's just very little of that. I mean, even as lawyers, we have more of it than some people. I have a trial coming up, and I know the date, and I prepare for it, and then we win or we lose. or a lot of times we might win legally, but it's still kind of a loss in the client's
Everybody
eyes.
loses.
You know, and so it's not like getting an A on a test.
That's right.
I might get an A from myself, be like, I performed well, I did the best with the facts I had, I presented it well, but my client's still disappointed. So even though we get a taste of it in law, there's just nothing else like being in school. I love it, and if someone would pay me to go to school forever, I would. But 1L year, at that point in life, and I think a lot of law students are in the same position, I've never been challenged academically. The most I was challenged academically was in high school. I went to a very special high school, but college was a breeze. I really did not need to study. And they tell you when you start, and I know you heard it, this is different. Many of you never studied. You were top of your class. It's going to be different here. And so I was worried. I will say it is different. You can't not study. You can't not read your assignments and go to class. You just can't.
You can't. It's an impossible thing to do.
Yeah.
It's a very unique type of...
You have to read it, or at a minimum, not that I'm advocating for it, but is it called Quimby? Is that right?
Yes.
You've got to at least read a summary.
Can help people, but
yes.
You still have to put the effort and time into even Quimby
yes.
for your classes.
You've
and that
got
is not
to do something. You have to know something. And exams, same way, you have to study. So when I started law school, I went in with the mindset, I'm this way with a lot of things, if I can get away with something, and I'm successful, I'm going to keep doing it. So if I got away with not reading for class, then I'm going to be like, well, maybe I'll get away with it next time. Or if I get away with not studying. So I went in full throttle. I would get to the law school at 7 a.m. Me and my roommate at the time, we would get there early. We'd either bring our breakfast, our lunch, and oftentimes our dinner. We'd have our classes. We'd study in between. We did take a lunch break for at least 30 minutes and chit chat and have fun. And then we'd go straight to the library and we would study until at least 10. And we would try to get started on the next day's assignment. And our goal was that on Thursday, if it was 8, this is so bad, but this is how we did it. If it was like 8:30 and we had finished our assignments for Friday, knowing we have the weekend to work on Monday, we'd go out.
Yes.
And we'd have a little fun. And sometimes that meant just getting queso and drinking wine at the apartment together. And sometimes that meant meeting up with our 2L and 3L friends that had a little less rigorous of a schedule. So I was pretty strict. 1L exams, crazy. I studied all hours, I will say, and you've heard the story, and this is a cautionary tale, and I think it's important for everyone to hear it. So my first exam was criminal law. And I ended the exam and thought, I made a 4. Like, I failed. I'm failing out of law school. What's the point? And I've never really just given up in this way, but it's grueling. It's a marathon. So, I did all those hours over the semester, and I had studied for 2 days straight for this exam and was like, I'm failing out anyway. What's the point? So I just kind of very lackadaisically studied for the rest, like a few hours here and there. Like, I'm not saying I didn't study at all, but I didn't study to the level that I had planned.
Right.
Got my grades back, and I made a 96 in that class.
That's how it goes.
And then, like, every class after that trickled down, which, I didn't study the way I was supposed to. And so I hear all the time, and we've talked about it, never trust your gut feeling on exam. Do not do what I hope someone hears this in law school and they don't do what I did, because it was so stupid. I'm like, oh my gosh. Because I think I let off the gas because I had other priorities than my grades. But I think I was number 23 in the class after that semester. And I remember thinking, I wonder if I'd studied.
Yep.
Where I would have ended up. And honestly, if I had been like close to the top 15, I might have gotten that like competitive bug to stay there. Yeah. But honestly, after that, I was like, okay, I know the effort I put in. I want to be on trial team. I ran for city council. I wanted to do other things. And I knew the people that were going to be in the top 15, top 10 were never going to let off the gas. And I didn't want to live that way for another 2.5 years. And so that was just an active choice. I knew I wasn't going into big law. So really as long as I passed and was in, my goal was like, as long as I'm in the top 40%, I don't care, because being in the top 10 doesn't further any of the goals I have. It's actually going to keep me from being as social as I want to be, because you can't just stop living while you're in law school. If you do, you're going to miss out on relationships and opportunities. I digress. So my second semester 1L year was much more enjoyable. Still studied a good bit, but I didn't stay till 10 p.m. every night just because I was a lot more relaxed. And I did not at any point during exams at the end stop studying. But I will say 1L year was the hardest. It does get significantly, whether it's easier or more manageable or you just get used to it, you have completed the first year and it will be so much better the next 2 years than the first was.
I've heard that it's harder 2L year and 3L year because the material is not intuitive, and so it is harder in that regard, and the reading assignments are longer. But at this point, I feel like I've gotten the hang of it, and I feel excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
Can't be any worse, right?
It cannot. Well, until you take the bar exam, but
that'll be worse.
Well, that's 2 years from now. We just won't talk about it.
Right. We have time. Did you always know that you wanted to go into family law, or did you consider other practice areas first?
I was adamant I would not be a family lawyer. So it's crazy how our mothers know us, especially, it was me and my mom for 10 years. So we are very close. She's my best friend. And when I started law school from the beginning, she said, you should do family law. And I don't know if it was, I told you the story about how I feel passionate about it now. I think she knew that was in me all along. But she couldn't tell me that. I had to get there on my own. And I was like, absolutely not. At the time, family law kind of had a pretty bad reputation. And especially where I went to law school at Campbell, nobody took the family law course. Wow. Everyone's attitude was, I'll learn it for the bar exam. Because it's not a main topic. It's a potential essay topic. So no one really took it. It was not popular. And funny enough, so I did trial team, and I wanted to litigate and be in the courtroom. And at the time, which is such a disservice, they need to do better about this in law schools. I thought the only way to be in a courtroom was to be a prosecutor or be a defense attorney.
Oh, wow.
Now, obviously, I knew that there's like white-collar crimes and there's corporate law, but that wasn't the kind of litigation I wanted to do. That's stuff that you prepare 5 years for one trial. You're not going often. I wanted to go to court often. And the only way I knew to do that at the time was criminal law. And I knew that wasn't for me. That it wasn't sustainable to be a prosecutor for a long term. And it was not sustainable for me to be a defense attorney because I want to be really good at my job. And I knew that would mean potentially representing people that I fundamentally disagree with.
That's right.
And I just didn't want to have to deal with that. So I didn't realize that family lawyers can go to court quite often. Now, there's some that stick in the settlement side of things and don't go to court, but if you were open to litigation, I mean, we were there 3 times last week.
3 times.
And it's just only increasing. So I had no idea. So I was very against it. I heard it was dramatic and the clients were tough and all this stuff. I actually got a job offer for family law when I was studying for the bar this summer during COVID. And it was actually, of the 4 or 5 job offers I got, the highest salary offer.
Wow.
And it was the first one I said no to.
Oh, no.
I was like, I'm not doing family law. And it wasn't until, so I just, for a brief background, started in personal injury, also not for me. I think that there is a personal injury litigation side that could have been for me. That was what I thought I was taking the job for. It was not. I was just talking to adjusters and doing small claims, and that was not courtroom litigation. So did not last there long. That was when I said I'm never going to be a lawyer again. Then I did cybersecurity sales for a while before I decided, okay, I'm not as, I didn't feel, it wasn't as fresh. Like the damage of working at that firm, the culture and the deception, it faded. And I was like, I have this law degree. And if I don't go be a lawyer soon, my resume is going to be so confusing. I'm never going to be hired. So I put out job applications in every area of law that I could find and was like, I'm going to explore. And the family law firm that I ended up working with, I just had the best interview, the best experience. And thank God the person interviewing me said, yeah, we go to court all the time. Actually, next Friday, before you accept, do you want to come to court and see what it's like? And I was stars in my eyes. I'm like, what do you mean? And I went to court and I was like, this is the perfect kind of, I love chaos. I love organized chaos. And a courtroom is literal organized chaos. And so jumped in within 2 months of doing family law, I knew I was going to start a family law practice one day. And so it was pretty instantaneous. And I have said to my mother over and over again, you can say I told you so. You were right. This was the area of law for me. So it's weird how the world works, but
It certainly is.
yeah.